Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Wanted to take just a brief couple of minutes here to, first of all, wish everyone a good Yontif, but also to leave you with something to think about and to ponder as we enter into Yontif, as Yontif approaches, and also throughout Yontif, specifically and particularly throughout the Tfilos. We're obviously going to be shooting for much more streamlined davening this year, and therefore I don't want to take the extra time in shul to actually address everyone with a drasha, but here in the interim, just a few minutes with something to think about that hopefully will create more of an uplifting Yontif and Tefillah experience for all of us. Really goes back to something that we were talking about on Motzei Shabbos this past week at our inaugural event at the shul, at the new shul, sanctifying our new space. We were speaking about the idea of slichos, and specifically the Gemara in Rosh Hashana. Gemara in Rosh Hashana, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, fills in some of the blanks that the Torah doesn't tell us about. What exactly did this conversation look like between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu? When Hashem first unveils the Yud Gimel Midos, tells Moshe Rabbeinu about these 13 attributes of mercy that if Klal Yisrael will submit to and will declare and will pronounce, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to forgive us all. That's exactly what Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, Ya'asu lefanai kaseder hazeh, that you should do before me with these 13 midos, or according to these 13 midos, these 13 attributes, and if you do so, then ani mochel lahem, I'm going to forgive them. Let the Jewish people know that whenever they find themselves in a tight spot, whenever they find themselves in a jam and they desperately need tshuva, don't worry, here's the model, here's the pattern, here's the formula for them to follow, Yud Gimel Midos, and that's going to conquer all, it's going to accomplish everything that they need. Many of the Mefarshim point out that if you take a really close look at the Gemara, it doesn't say Emor lefanai kaseder hazeh, that the Jewish people are simply supposed to relate or speak, declare these midos before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but rather Ya'asu lefanai kaseder hazeh. When we really want Mechila, when we really want to be forgiven, when we want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take us back, when we want Hashem to effectively shower us with mercy and compassion, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? Ya'asu lefanai, do before me, act before me. Here are 13 ways in which I shower my blessing and my compassion upon the Jewish people and upon all of humanity. I want you to act in a similar fashion. If you do, then ani mochel lachem. Then I'm going to forgive you. Then you'll have whatever kapara, whatever atonement you could possibly need. HaKadosh Baruch Hu effectively is unveiling a matching campaign. He says, I'm willing to give. I have the compassion. I have the goods. I'm signed up. No problem. I'll give it to you. But I want to know that you're also going to make the effort. I want to know that you're also going to try to act as compassionately as possible. Indeed, we suggested on Motzei Shabbos, maybe this is one of the reasons why Slichos in the first place was only instituted to be recited by a tzibur. Because if we're speaking about compassion, obviously we cannot be compassionate in a vacuum. I can't be compassionate when I'm all by myself. My compassion only can be exercised, only has a real voice if there are other people around me. If I'm part of a kehila, if I'm part of a tzibur, then I can act compassionately. I look to my right and I look to my left, I see people who are in need of mercy, of compassion, and of kindness, and I'm able to provide to them exactly what I'm asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for. So this is something that certainly we should think about every single Rosh Hashana. I dare say that it becomes difficult. It's difficult to carve out the space when on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur throughout the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, we're thinking about how much we personally are in need of mercy. And I think that's probably the tone that overwhelmingly our tefillos take. Hashem, be compassionate upon me. Hashem, I need your mercy. Hashem, there's so much that I need. I need health. I need bracha. I need parnasa. I need this and I need that. We think about mercy in the capacity of Hashem, please you give me, but not necessarily so much in our giving to everyone else. So we should certainly be thinking about that, but I would argue that this year perhaps even more so. This year when the realities of the pandemic has created such a bifurcated system, has created such disparity in terms of where we are all physically going to be located. This year especially, when we are davening our tefillos and when we're turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we're hoping and praying for rachmanus from Him upon me and upon my family and upon my friends and upon everything that exists within my little sphere of influence, let's think a little bit more broadly. Let's think about the compassion that we can show one another, and at the very least, let's open up our tefillos to be considerate and be concerned with the plight and the state of others, even as we ask for rachmanus. Do we usually think about rachmanus for everyone else? Do we usually think about compassion and about mercy for everyone else that might also be in need? Let's indeed consider the compassion and the mercy that we need ourselves, but also be a little bit more expansive, and especially this year. Let's think about the people who still are not capable of making it to shul. Let's think about those people who cannot even daven b'tzibur, and they're going to be davening alone, going to be davening at home. Won't have that same degree of enhancement of tefillah by davening with the tzibur. Let's think about all those that are in need of extra compassion and extra tefillos, and maybe their own personal tefillos can't, this year in particular, have that extra heft. Let's think about those people who are at home because they're going to be with a lot of their children and ordinarily would absolutely take advantage of coming to shul, but this year can't because we can't really have childcare, we can't really have daycare. And therefore, first and foremost, we need to be able to provide for our families, provide for our children. So many are going to be home this year, whereas in years past, and Mirza Hashem, years in the future, would obviously be at shul. What are their tefillos going to look like? So hopefully they'll be beautiful, hopefully they'll be wonderful, hopefully they'll be heartfelt. But let's carve out space, each one of us in our own tefillos, for those who, for whatever reason, might not be able to daven just as well as us. And I'd like to expand it one more notch and one more rung, one more orbit. You know, the reality of the pandemic is that we've become, and understandably so, on the one hand, so much more connected with one another, and yet, to some degree, so much more insular. We're obviously not seeing one another and interacting with one another to the same degree that we once were. And furthermore, there are so many issues and so many concerns and so many challenges that each one of us have with our own personal lives, our own personal families, our own selves, that it becomes more difficult to think more broadly. I know for me personally, Chatai ani mazkir hayom, I feel so much more disconnected, truly, from Eretz Yisrael than I feel that I was just 6 months ago, 7 months ago. The realities of needing to take care of whatever is happening immediately in your tightest orbit means that it becomes more difficult to really reach out. I don't know how many are aware, but Rosh Hashana in Israel is not going to be what Rosh Hashana in Eretz Yisrael is supposed to be like, and what we've accustomed to expect of a Yontif in Eretz Yisrael. It's going to be on lockdown. And yes, there will be minyanim here and there, 10 people indoors, 20 people outdoors. As long as you're within a few meters of your front door, yeah, you can access a minyan. But it just won't be the same, and there will be so very many, who don't have the opportunity to go to shul, don't have the opportunity, will not be able to avail themselves of tefillah b'tzibur. Let's carve out that space in our own minds. We are so desperate for rachmanas from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for Hashem's mercy, Hashem's compassion for us. Let's be compassionate. Let's be compassionate in our deed, but let's also be compassionate even just in our thoughts, just in our hearts, just in our minds, just in our tefillos. Let us encompass as many others as we possibly can. Let's think about neighbors that might not be sitting next to us who usually are. Let's think about those who are going to have a more challenging time davening because for whatever reason they cannot be part of a tzibur this year. Let's think about those who might have a greater challenge than I do, even if I am davening at home, but will have a greater challenge really mustering the kavanah that I know that I'll still be capable of. And let's also think about Achenu b'nei Yisrael on the other side of the ocean. Achenu b'nei Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, who are not going to have the Rosh Hashana that we would so hope that they would have, and that we've become so accustomed to expecting of what Yontif looks like, the majesty of Yontif in Eretz Yisrael. Going to be in smaller minyanim, so many going to be home. Let's make sure that we keep all of Achenu b'nei Yisrael in our hearts and in our minds, in our tefillos throughout this Rosh Hashanah. Wishing everybody a ksiva v'chasima tova.